Well, speaking of strong, how's the Larryanator tonight?
Oh, I'm strong, man. I'm strong. Coming off a big week over here. We're good.
Okay. And Gimpy, are you treading water?
Yeah, doing better.
Wow, that $6 million man, they got you penned together. Captain Kirk's long time no talk.
Yes, sir. I'm here.
Yeah, I heard that we lost our third segment of observations this afternoon.
Oh,
and you were on a roll, so yeah, there we go. So we're going to reprise some of that, unless.
And that's exactly when I called in too. It was bad.
Oh.
You guys heard me, right?
Oh, absolutely. You were spectacular as you.
Fabulous.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure everybody got it.
Yeah. So this particular proverb is something we went over quickly in shows a long time ago, and we've been retracing our steps because upon further investigation, the fatherly advice was more direct to our particular mission than we had ever thought before. And when I say our particular mission, I sense to a large degree that our Towrah chorus for these days is specifically designed to do what this proverb is doing, to highlight the reasons that God is opposed to religion and politics, to explain what the resolution is if you have been involved in religion and politics, and specifically to call out and criticize the most popular religions and political schemes. Now, some of these things you wouldn't think would need a whole lot of exposure. I mean, I watched enough of the presidential debate last night to know that there isn't a viable candidate in the lot of them.
Did you take a bath afterward?
You know, you feel like you need to. It's the same thing as studying Paul's letters and writing Questioning Paul, or studying Muhammad's insane diatribe to write Prophet.
I'll take my hat off to you for both of those.
You know, I'm currently beginning the 4th chapter of Observations for a Time, and I decided that I wanted to do something that I haven't done in I don't know how long we've been doing this, but I think it's 15 years that this all began. And and for 15 years ago, I heard this voice inside that said, I'd like you to go on a mission for me. There's something I'd like you to do for me. Who is this? It happens to be God. Yeah, right. And what I want you to do is I want you to expose and condemn Islam. I want people left without an excuse. And I recall the whole discussion about, yeah, right, I'm not qualified for that. And by the time we finished negotiating, and God gave me exactly what He wanted to do. In other words, once I asked Him for what He wanted, we were off to the races. But the confirmation that He was going to do what He had promised. He said, it's in your right pants pocket. Read it. And there, sitting in my right pants pocket, was the 91st Psalm. And I recall having read it 15 years ago. The day happened to be Towrah, of all things. It was Towrah in September of 2001. And for the first time now in 15 years, I've actually written down what occurred on that day. And now, for the first time, actually starting to translate the 91st Psalm. I kind of began the chapter by saying this is the psalm that launched 3 million words. I think that's where we are thus far. Is 3 million words.
That's astounding, Yada.
Yeah,
really.
And guys, it all began because, and Roy's much more adept at this than I am. But while Yahowah cannot and does not want to see his future in the seventh dimension. He absolutely can see our future as in this world of 3.5 dimensions that he created for us. And so he can tell, he knew how Larry, how JB, how Kirk and I were going to respond to his invitation. And so he knew that we'd be open-minded, that we would go where the words lead. We were willing to invest the time, that we would enjoy the process of getting to know him. And so he did for us a great favor in introducing himself. And,
well, he did. You know, when he talks, and one of the things I do understand is free will. I mean that's paramount in any real relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about knowing Yahowah in the womb.
Yeah. Right.
And that means that although Yahowah had not maybe known him yet, he knew him before, vice versa. And that means that it's the same thing with us, is that Yahweh, and I've had many people ask this, how is it I felt protected before I knew Yahweh? It's just simple. You know Yahweh. And he's not going to let his children not be protected, in situations where they need to be. And, there are situations where we don't need to be. There's situations where, like Yahshua decides, it's time to be murdered, or Zachariah, same thing.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, that was the thing that was so strong with me, because at the time I read it, and it said, one of the things I wanted was, since exposing Muslims had caused most people to go into hiding, and many were hunted down and killed, I wanted my family and home protected. This wasn't their fight. And so the psalm begins with a promise to do that, and it continues in that regard. And I don't think Yahweh intervenes very often in free will. I think it's few and far between when he does it. He certainly doesn't do it to help people score touchdowns or get base hits, or to get a yes on a date with a pretty girl. But when it's his family, and his family is engaged in something he wants done, he absolutely does. And so I'm quite convinced that over the course of the last 15 years, that there have been Malak whose job it was to deter Muslims from killing me. And it's not because I'm special, at least among people, but, if you're willing to do what God wants done, he's going to make certain that you have that opportunity.
Yeah, and he knows you before you knew him. That's the whole point.
Correct.
Here.
Yeah,
that means that protection is there, whether you know it or not.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, there were 3 times in my life prior to that request where I should have been dead. I nearly died of malaria, and it's a miracle I survived malaria. But it's malaria that saved my life, because it kept me off an airplane that was the first act of international Islamic terrorism, where the 77 people aboard all died. I was taken on that airplane.
Wow.
And, there are a number of situations. I was flying my airplane. It's a pretty remarkable bird back in the day that I had a Pilatus, but you couldn't stall it. If you stalled it, you were going to die. It goes knife edge. And you couldn't do a roll in it because you couldn't recover from a roll. So it was designed to be stable. But I got caught in what's called wake turbulence, vortex off 2 Airbuses over the Pentagon going into Reagan.
Threw you away.
I was
threw you around.
I was turned upside down. I was upside down over the Pentagon at about 1,000 feet. It's irrecoverable in the airplane. But, here we're talking. So there is, I think, a considerable amount of truth to when God says, I knew Yirmiyah in the womb. He knew each of us before we were born. And he's not intervening in free will in that regard, because he knows
because then the
our
relationship
future.
wouldn't be real.
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
It's not like You're My Yah was a wind-up doll. I just want to throw this out here to you, too. You just told an incredible story there. I mean, there's no way you should have gotten out of that. I drive, typically, I've got kind of a heavy foot, 85 or 90, okay, on the freeway. I mean, that's just what I do. And I'm going down I-10, and at the time, I had a girlfriend, and my girlfriend was in the car. She saw it, I saw it. We're going down 10, headed east into Jacksonville, Florida. There is, as far as my rearview mirrors can see, nobody behind me, okay? I mean, we're just the lone car on the road. Suddenly, a car appears 6 feet in front of me. No time to react. So we just both kind of react by cringing up, as people do when all of a sudden you know you're about to have a major impact, because this car was going 10 miles an hour, maybe. It disappeared. And I looked at her, and I said, did you just see that? I'm not one given to nonsense, you know. And she said, yeah. And I said, well, where did it go? I'm looking in my rear view mirror. I'm turning my head. I'm doing it. It's gone. The car's gone. That actually happened to me. Now, I've never told a lot of people this story. I've told a couple of people that story. I've never really, we didn't even speak about it ever again. But it was an insane situation. I mean, I don't know what you say to a thing like that. I don't know. I really don't know.
Yeah. You know,
when I died.
Yeah, when I began this, it reminds me of how I began this chapter. I went through that whole story, and you know, at the end of it, I said, it doesn't matter whether you believe that I heard this voice or that I was asked to engage in this mission. It's really irrelevant. And the reason it's irrelevant is the only thing that matters is what God said to all of us. You know, I shared my personal experience because it provided the perspective on the relationship and my attitude as it relates to translation. So I thought, you know, it might be interesting for people to know, but it's irrelevant what to anyone other than us, really, how God intervenes personally. But if you think about how much would have been lost to the family and how many people would never have come to know Yahweh or engage in the covenant if you'd run into that car.
Or you hadn't written the words that I share. You know,
right. Or,
yeah,
right. If I'd been killed earlier.
You said about Richard or Kirk or JB, whoever. I'm just saying, these things happen, and again, they don't matter. And by the way, for people who don't know Yada, you got to understand, he's not one running around talking about miracles. This is not what we do here. It's actually very strange hearing this.
You know, by the way, I've never asked God for a miracle.
No, I haven't.
There's no reason to.
No.
Maybe when I was a Christian to pay my electric bill when I had 4 kids a couple of times.
So,
but that's about
but not since I've known him.
Right.
You know, I figured that so long as we're doing what he wants done, my well-being is his responsibility. I don't need to ask him. Why would you ask him? And the last thing Yahweh wants to be is flashy. And so if he doesn't want to be flashy, he most certainly doesn't want somebody who wants to be flashy representing him.
Well, his words are clear, right? I know what you need before you ask.
Correct.
What's the point of asking?
What's the point of asking?
That's where I come from.
I can't think of anything that I would ask God, including the thing that I want the most, which is a better understanding, an ability to translate his testimony more clearly and to describe it more accurately. I mean, that's the thing that I want the most. When I get the most pleasure out of, the thing I spend the most time doing, that's what I want the most. I don't even ask him for that. Because why would you ask him for the very thing that he wants done?
Good point.
He's already said he's going to give you.
Oh, of course.
He'd love to give you that.
Right, of course. And so there's no reason to ask him. And so when I heard, Kirk, you were talking in the... and I think it was the third segment of observations today. And you were talking about how much fun you were having, learning the insights that lie underneath the words. Like we had come across a word that we're talking about God was exposing Paul, and he said, one of the things that's unique about this guy is going to be a pervert.
Mm-hmm.
Here's Paul in his seminal letter, a letter to the Romans. He said, I'm a sexual pervert. Most people don't know that. But he said, I'm a sexual pervert, and he blamed the Torah for making him a sexual pervert. And so God said, okay, I knew he was going to write it.
So he
And
exposed him first, 1,000 years earlier.
Right. It's like the fun that I found when there were two Pauline revelations that were beyond just, this is a prediction, and here's here is God telling us what to look for, and here's the only person that matches it, which is just evidence and reason. But when he was talking about Paul being shifty and shuffling his stance on things, well, the word that he said he was going to be shifty on and shifting his stance was Baal, the Hebrew word for circumcision. And you go, okay, that was pretty clever.
That was.
Yeah, and then you read further, and he names him. He says, yeah, he's the lowly and little one. When you find that stuff, it's fun.
Yeah, it is. I even tell people you don't have to read Paulos' letters. You can read what Yahweh said about him.
Right. Much rather read what he said
about how these have all been changed. Well, hey, welcome to the club of the many, partner. All the words have been changed. But yet, they like Paulos' stuff up. I mean, when you start talking about castrating people that are Torah observant, come on.
Right. Or that if you're circumcised, that Christ can't save you. Or calling the old system, what he would then call the Old Testament, pornography. I mean,
pornos. Yeah.
As we were talking in the third hour about Paul on observations, how could there be a single Christian after Paul wrote in the 13th chapter of Romans that all governments are appointed by God, that there is no government authority except by God, and that governments do not raise their sword for bad, but instead for good, when Rome, within 2 decades of that time, destroyed the temple of Yahowah, hauled off hundreds of thousands of Jews into slavery, took the profits from the temple, and used it and the slaves to build the Roman Colosseum, the most disgusting arena for display of human decadence ever conceived. And then you have nation fighting nation. How in the world can these nations both derive their authority from God and be agents of God and be agents of good and only wield the sword in good if they're massacring each other?
Yeah, and I've got a question here. That's a good point. You said hundreds of thousands. I have tried to find, over and over, it was some information I was going to put in a note that I was doing. And I never could find out how many actual Yehudim were hauled out of Jerusalem, or out of Yisrael in general, into slavery in Rome. Do you have any rough estimates on that or anything?
Yeah, there are 2 occurrences, of course, 70 and 133.
And then 133. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. And the problem is that the historians, I'm going to put that in air quotes, that are providing the information, because Hadrian wrote very little down, and his legions were decimated. So it was an unmitigated disaster for Rome, because in both attacks, it was the only time, other than the freak occurrences up there in Germany, where legions had to be disbanded. So the Romans didn't want to talk much about it, and then you have the Roman historians, circa 300 CE, that weren't historians, they were propagandists. And so they just wholly exaggerated everything. But collectively, between the two, the number appears to be somewhere around 500,000 Jews murdered, about a quarter of them by crucifixion, between the two. That would be the number killed. The number hauled off into slavery in the first incidents was in the tens to hundreds of thousands, and we don't know the number. But it's enough that the slaves they hauled out are pictured on Hadrian's wouldn't be Hadrian's Arch, because Vespasian and his son, their arch. There are just a huge parade of Jews being hauled into Rome to build the Colosseum. The second diaspora is the big one. That's the one under Rabbi Akiba. And while most Jews escaped Israel in 70 CE, they were drawn back to Israel by Hadrian's promises to rebuild the temple. And when they arrived and returned, Hadrian sprung his trap. And at that point, there were no Jews left in the land. All surviving Jews. All surviving Jews were hauled off into captivity.
Total? Would
So
you think a million?
700,000? Yeah, could have scared a million. But
wow. Okay.
We don't have good numbers because the literate Hebrews were murdered, because there was this great crusade against Hebrew and the Torah, and so if you could read or write Hebrew, you were burned alive, along with any document written in Hebrew, including the original copies of Matanya and also the Torah.
Now, did Josephus say anything about this?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I've got that. I can go downstairs maybe and do a little research for you, Larry, see what we can find.
Well, I'd like that, Kirk, and if you know, just please shoot it over to me in an email.
The problem even with Josephus is that
he was
he was a traitor. He was a Israeli general turned traitor, and while many of the things that he wrote were accurate and it's their oldest resource into the period, he at that point he was writing for Rome on behalf of Rome.
Yeah.
He sure as hell wasn't writing for his people.
Mm-hmm.
So have to be careful in that regard. I do want to share, just since Lisa has been commenting on Psalm 91, just the first opening line of Psalm 91, because it has some insights that I think are fascinating. It begins, "He who dwells." Now it's speaking individually to us individually, if you will. "He who dwells," Yasab, "he who inhabits and lives restored, he who approaches and remains, he who settles down and establishes his dwelling, he who camps out after being renewed. In the sheltered covering, in the protected place of the Almighty." This is Elyon. It's not used very often. Elyon is the root is likely the Allah, to withdraw, to ascend, to meet the light, going up and visiting, to gain status and splendor. So, in the sheltered covering, so he who dwells in the sheltered covering, then we'd be he who camps out, enveloped in the set-apart Spirit's garment of light, which is, as we know now, is the Torah of the Almighty, in the shadow and resulting image of the most extensive and powerful one, he abides, spending the night. So, it says that if you've chosen to live sheltered and there's only one sheltered covering from Yahweh, and that's the Torah of light that the set-apart Spirit envelops us in. And this whole concept, of course, is synonymous with the idea of camping out with God. It's synonymous with Sukkah, a return to Eden, if you will. So he who camps out, he who dwells in the sheltered covering of the Almighty, in the shadow and resulting image of the most extensive and powerful one, the Shaddai, he abides, spending the night. And this in the shadow is in the shadow is Ba Tesel, and it's from Teselim, which is image, resemblance. It's a shadow in the sense of it's an image created by the light, but in one less dimension. And so it says that we're going to be in the image. So those who choose to camp out with God are going to be in the image. And this Shaddai, the more I studied it, it means this image that we're going to be cast into, this resemblance, is of the most extensive and powerful one. Shaddai means to expand, to be capable, to be powerful. So we're going to become, like God, more extensive, more powerful, more capable, more influential, with greater abilities. And the word actually speaks of the ability to cultivate and to nurture life. And
wow.
So those who camp out with the Almighty are going to be in the image of the most extensive, powerful, and capable one, abiding there on an ongoing basis. And then the question really is Luin, is it simply abiding, living, lodging, resting, dwelling, or is there also an aspect of night associated with it? And if it is, then we have to deal with the imagery here, which is for a while we're still here on this planet, we're in the darkness. You mentioned it was a dirty job exposing Islam, exposing Christianity. It's a dirty job. So we're in the world of darkness, and yet God is going to empower us, enrich us, nurture us, making us ever more like Him, still one less dimension than He is, at least one less dimension than He is, but still in His image, and going to protect us, nurture us, while we're in the darkness of this world. That's a pretty good start for a psalm.
Yeah, it's very enlightening. I mean, it's
very comforting.
And of course, we understood that we would be exponentially growing from, Shavuot as an example.
Yeah.
But this is just painting a little broader strokes there, I think.
Yeah, in fact, Lisa's writing the gematria for El Shaddai is the equation for pi, which
the journal.
It's actually an irrational number. I mean, a number that can't be resolved, but pi is gives us the ability to calculate the volume in a sphere or the circumference of a circle, and what is interesting about that in relation to this particular promise is that God has said if you choose to be inside of the protective covering, to be enveloped, to be surrounded by the protective covering of Yahweh, then you're going to be in the image of pi, of the circle, of the sphere. So
and that's what Well, we get 2 out of the menorah with the 22 letters divided by the 7. You get pi again, right?
Yeah. Yeah, fascinating.
You got the eternal light of Yahweh.
Yeah.
That's pretty clear.
That the math that's associated with his alphabet and the words that he chooses to use is, I am certain, is well beyond what we have considered, and is another affirmation. But fortunately, we've got an eternity to study those formulas, and all of them will be interesting.
Well, this week I have to say, that was the case this week. Every time I looked something, I found something new. It was freaky. I just went, wow. And this was old material I'd already done. And I went back and did it again independently with the other.
Yeah, I'm quite convinced that there would be nothing I would ever publish if I would reach a point where I could read it and not add anything new to it. Every time you look at it, every time you read it, you see something.
Oh, I got to go ahead that. I got to go ahead that. I got to go ahead that.
Yeah. Pretty soon, chapters aren't 24 pages anymore, but 240 pages.
Jackie will.
Yeah. For he will come.
Now, a question, and this is just something I was thinking. You are adding these additions to Yada Yahweh, aren't you?
No, it's going to be a new book. No, new book.
Just the total, just observations, just the whole new book. Okay.
Observations for our time, new book. There are 3 chapters currently completed, and I'm working on the 4th now, and they are going to get posted. I think they're available probably in a number of sites now. I think Richard has them up. I think there's some others.
You're not going to get carried away or anything, right?
In the sense of writing a whole other.
I'm kidding. I'm only kidding. Just stop right there. That's it.
Yeah.
Full stop.
Yeah, I can't tell you. Can I tell you where it's going though? I mean, all I know is that the first chapter is Proverbs 6. We're reviewing it now. The second is 1 Samuel 7:3, which and then insights related passages to the religious things that God is trying to divert us away from. And then the third chapter is on God's treatise on why we ought not trust government, what government will seek to do to those that it controls. And the 4th chapter is on Psalm 91. I think the likelihood from there is that I'll do at least 2 chapters on other Shaul sightings that have been shared, and go back into Hosea, go back into Yahshua, and to cover that. I do think that since a theme is to stay away from the whore of Babylon, from religion and politics, I'll translate Isaiah, Yahshua 17 as the Satan is associated with Babylon. I think that would be an interesting thing to do. So that gets you out about 8 or 9, 10 chapters into it. And then from there, we'll kind of see where it goes as to whether or not we'll continue to do Proverbs and Psalms, or we'll, in terms of just the relationship that Yahweh envisions and what we should avoid, his fatherly advice, or do we go to the thing that I think most people find the most fascinating, which is end times prophecy. But
can I ask one quick question before you get further? In 6:16, which we hadn't gotten to yet, and they used the word 7, and rather than just write 7, I kept looking. It says it means to be 7.
Yeah.
When you say something, is that 7 dimensions?
Yeah, I think so.
I do too.
Yeah, I do.
I passed that line several times, and I said, "Oh, okay." Well, I never paid much attention to it, but it's in light of with all the discussions with Roy and so forth, and this the one you just were doing with Larry. I think that's absolutely it, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's the nature of Jacob's ladder as well. Is that while we're not told the number of rungs on it, we're told so many times that the answer is always 7. That
yes, it is.
Right. That is the number, and we can be intuitive, and we can figure it out. So here we go. I want to, the previous statements in Proverbs 6 says that what's it going to take for you to wake up? What do I have to do to get your attention? Because being apathetic here, being lethargic, being unaware is a really dangerous place for you to be. Because if you're
and what number
unaware,
are we on? I'm sorry.
we're going to begin on Proverbs 6:11, and I'm just talking about 9, whereas God's saying there's a real consequence for being ignorant here, because if you're unaware, you're going to be ill-equipped, and there's going to be a guy that's going to come, and if you're unaware of my perspective, of my Torah directions, he's going to beguile you, and you're going to lose everything. So here is God saying, introducing us to Paul, and it begins, "For he will come, walking and behaving like a leader or guide, taking control, and you will lack what is needed, and have a scarcity of something absolutely vital, needing what you do not have, causing you to be bereaved and diminished." So somebody is coming, according to God, and this was written he, so it's singular. One individual is coming. That God is concerned that his people are going to be misled because they're ill-prepared. They lack something that is vital. The only thing I'm aware of that is vital is the Torah.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying, if you're not willing to study his Torah, come to know it. This person that's going to behave like a leader, going to claim to be in charge, going to claim to be a guide, going to take control. Paul said the entire Gentile world was his, that he was the leader. He was the guide. He was the apostle. And if you're ill-prepared, he'll eat you up alive. Now, you would think
and it's obvious that he was the guy, because Yahowah chose Yahukanan to write the letters to all the ecclesia. I mean, it's pretty obvious it was Paul.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So we now have a hint here that this lone individual that he's talking about is Paul. But it gets more direct. He then says, and this is 6:12, "A confusing and incorrect, a wicked and worthless man, a mystifying man, a vile, evil, and troublesome man that is abhorred, detested, and valueless, ungodly and unprofitable, destructive and corrupt, and inconsistent and non-conforming." This is from Baal, baffling and confusing, difficult to understand as a result of commingling, and Bali, to be lacking and without, to be negated and for naught. So a man that commingles and is confusing and incorrect, and man is Adam, singular. This is one person. And unjust, dishonest, evil, and vain individual, Ish, a person, singular, travels about with speeches which are wrong, false, crooked, perverting, and corrupting, with words which indicate he's a pervert. This is 6:12. Now, there is no question here that God is talking about a single individual. He can't make it any more clear. A man, one man, singular. A singular individual is coming with speeches that are false, crooked, perverting, and corrupting, with words that indicate he's a pervert. And he's going to travel around and be known for these words. Do you know that of all the people that claimed to be a leader, who claimed to speak for God, who twisted and perverted what God had to say. There's only one that was known for his travels, and he is known more for his travels than he is for anything else, on his travels and his words. Paul. And we went through today on all the places that Paul went. Hopefully that's in the second hour, and we have half an hour, we didn't lose it. But it takes you 20 minutes just to go through his travel log. And so here's this man going about to all these places, marking the Gentile world, if you will, as his territory. And the whole time, he's corrupting and perverting what Yahweh said. That's the lone man who did this. Now, if you don't think it's Paul, come up with somebody else.
I feel like we're back in Shabbat.
Muhammad really only traveled between two places, Mecca and Medina. Joseph Smith pretty much stuck to Utah.
Right. And if you look at
At least once he was kicked out
Rabbi
of the rest
Akiva,
of the country.
he stayed in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you look at Hadrian, while he traveled a fair amount, his travels were principally between Rome, the battles in Jerusalem and Yehuda, and then he had to go to Greece to perform the Dionysus rituals. But,
Yeah. The only other one that would come to mind would be Siddhartha, but he didn't get talked in the name of God, so that rules him out.
Nobody else is twisting the Torah, or
right.
destroying the Torah,
Yeah.
not twisting. A lot of them twist. Akiva twisted, but he didn't certainly write his own new Torah.
Now then it says this individual is going to come with a sinister winking of his eyes. He subtly signals the vacillating nature of his proclamations by shuffling about regarding circumcision with his stance, while casting aspirations with his fingers. The sinister winking, and as we talked today of the eyes, is indicative of Paul claiming that, I'm going to be whatever I need to be to gain an advantage. I'll be Jewish if that works. I'll be a Gentile if that works.
I observe the Torah.
Yeah, sure. I'm a rabbinical student, and nobody knows that stuff better than I do. That's me.
He gives all his defenders tap dancing room. Look over here where he defended the Torah, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
he does
really,
it once.
they do that.
Yeah, he does it once. Yeah. And by the way, all you prove when you defend the Torah once and tear it down 100 times is that you can't be trusted. If you say the Torah cannot save, and you say that the Torah is cruel, and that it's of the flesh and it enslaves, and then you say the Torah is wonderful, I support the Torah, all you're displaying there is you are filled with personal contradictions, and you can't be trusted. And the reason that a person does this, like there are many statements from Muhammad that if you're taken out of context, you say, all right, that's, there should be no compulsion in religion. And then he has 100 lines that said, if you see a Jew, kill him. If you see a Christian, it's not going to be accepted to them. He's your enemy. And if you side with them, we're going to kill you. And if you reject Islam, we're going to kill you. But there's no compulsion in religion. So they throw out the one line so that people seeking to defend them have a line to hang their hat on. And that's the same thing with Paul. But all you do is you prove that you're a liar. That's all Paul does by his one line that says he supports the Torah, is proves that he can't be trusted. That he's not even consistent with his own message.
Right. Well, it's the same thing Muhammad did, right?
Exactly.
If I get my word and then I find something that's better, I go to that.
Right. Internal inconsistency is the quickest sign that someone's lying, and you can't trust them.
Correct.
Good point.
Right.
That's right. Straight up. That's right.
This subtly vacillating regarding his proclamations by shuffling about regarding circumcision is from malal. And malal's primary meaning is to circumcise. It speaks of circumcision. And so the stance that God is saying is sinister, and the vacillating proclamations that God is trying to alert us to are regarding circumcision. Now, there's only one person in all of human history that drew a line in the sand that based his corruptions on circumcision. Paul. That's it. And his position was even vacillating. As we shared today, the fact is, as Paul was called into Jerusalem, because the disciples had heard that he was speaking against, that he was speaking out against circumcision, and he was torn up for it. On the way out of town, what does he do?
He circumcises his partner.
Right, he circumcises Timothy. Talk about a hypocrite. You know, he says, if you're circumcised, you can't be saved. And on the way out of town, he circumcises Timothy?
Yeah, that's another thing they use, by the way. That's another thing they use, the defenders of Paulos, where his words have been so corrupted. Whoa.
So they say that because he
my argument to that is,
Timothy,
if his
that
words
he
have
wasn't
been so
against
corrupted,
circumcision?
then we should dismiss them anyways. You know, either way,
Well,
you're just
my argument to that is since the oldest thing that of Paul's writings is P46, and you can look at it, and he talks about how people in the Torah should be that observe the Torah should be castrated, especially those getting circumcised. He wished them castrated, and then how he calls it pornos. If that's the oldest writing you have, wow, what corrupt the corruption
P46
came
is
later
a
when they tried to
late
eliminate them.
first century document.
Mhm.
It's the closest, and it's comprehensive. It's got all of Paul's letters in it. It's
That's
the
right.
closest manuscript, extant material to the original autograph of anything. And so if Paul's testimony was corrupted and changed from what he wrote within 20 years of when he wrote it, then, and what you've got is garbage, then you have to toss it out anyway, just James said.
Yeah. It's a
catch-22
form.
But the fact
the
is,
oldest
his
that you have,
writings
what they've tried
were
to
not
do.
corrupted. You know why we know that they weren't corrupted? Is because he says the same thing. All of his
over
letters
and over.
say the same thing. He is
Right.
against the Torah. He's against the existing covenant, and he's against the disciples, and he claims God's authority for the entire Gentile world. And
Which was his first letter? Which one was
Galatians.
his first? Was it Ephesians?
Galatians.
Oh, Galatians.
Galatians. Right. Galatians was first, and then he wrote the 4 letters between Corinth and Thessalonica, and then his 6th letter was Romans. And you know, between those 6 letters, he has confirmed and reconfirmed everything that he had to say, all of which is untrue. He didn't write anything that was true. So here,
He didn't even get his name right.
no,
He lied about his own name.
correct. He didn't even come in his own name. And this is the interesting thing, that he is all while casting aspersions, while hurling destructive accusations, which overturn valid teaching. Well, Yara is the basis of Torah. You know what tells us when he introduces the word Torah for the first time? He tells us that Torah is based on Yara. Yara means to teach. And so he is casting aspersions, Yara, while hurling destructive accusations which overturn valid teaching. Again, we're right back at Paul. Then he writes, with confusing and false perceptions which invert reality in his heart from his perspective, guiding his thoughts and conduct, his motivations and goals. He devises and inscribes antagonistic schemes without consideration or consequence, which are evil and adversarial, raw, in everything, continuously creating controversies and contentious strife, stirring up heated, bitter, and violent conflicts through human knowledge and academic philosophy, as one who claims to be sent out as a messenger to do away with something important. You know, God is doing his best to awaken the comatose. Remember, he began this by saying, what's it going to take for you to wake up and to stop being so unaware? And here he is laying out his case against Pauline Christianity. Obviously, it wasn't enough.
No one in the world does this. Has brought this up. And it's laying there. It's just been laying there.
It's laying there. Yeah. You know, confusing and false perceptions which invert reality. Every time that Paul quotes from the Torah, prophets, and Psalms, he takes the point that Yahweh was making and he inverts it. And he does that by taking a statement out of context, truncating, shortening the sentence, so he only includes some of the words that were in the sentence, and then mistranslates it from Hebrew to Greek, so that he can give the impression that God is saying the opposite of what he is saying. You know, it's like the first King James translation of the 10 statements, and it says, "Thou shalt commit adultery." Well, it does say that. They forgot the low, "Thou shalt not commit adultery." But
no,
you know,
they forgot it. I thought they thought they could slip that by people and get it in there.
"Thou shalt commit adultery." Now, what is interesting here is, of course, that Paul's whole argument against the Torah was he was antagonistic towards everything that God stood for. I mean, essentially said that God's testimony couldn't be relied on, that God was impotent, he couldn't save anybody, and that his Torah was obsolete. And God is saying this individual is going to be adversarial. Well, Paul in 2 Corinthians admits that he's demon-possessed. He says the thorn in his side is a messenger from Satan for the express purpose of keeping his ego in check. Now,
Can you imagine?
yeah, can you imagine nearly 2 billion people today believing, aligning themselves, acknowledging that they're part of a religion that was created by a man who admitted that he was demon-possessed? And they carry that around.
I can imagine it because it's happening. I mean, it's totally bizarre. I mean, there can be no question that it's completely out there. You know, but
I mean, how many times have you told people in notes that Paul admitted in the last chapter of 2 Corinthians that he was demon-possessed?
300.
And is there anybody who has said, "Wow, you know, that changes everything"? I never
Defenders
knew
of Paul? No.
Yeah.
No. They, you know, see, the thing about the people that tap dance for Paul, I call them Paulettes. What it is that they do is instead, and they tap dance, you know, I mean, they're tap dancers, unbelievable tap dancers. What they do, no matter what you throw up, I mean, you can show direct assaults on the Torah. Okay, God said this. Paul says
Romans 7, the most inverted, insane, irrational diatribe ever uttered in the name of God. Romans 7 is the woman's husband died, and she's now freed of the Torah of the husband, and in the same way, we're now freed of the Torah of God.
This is lovely. Yeah.
There's no Torah of the husband. You can't equate the Torah to a dead man, and there's no correlation. None of it. This is there's no correlation between these things. You know,
yeah, but you can show them as an example. You can show them, "Call no man father." You know, now this is Yahusha talking. He won't even call himself father. The Father's greater than I am. You know? And then call me father and be followers. I'm your father, and you know, and you show these side by side by side. I mean, just things like that, or you show them where Hosea they've put kings and governors in positions that I didn't know, and he's saying, "Oh,
that's Romans
put there
13.
by God." And you show that right in a row, and they start dancing around words and become basically insane parrots for their religion is all it really comes down to. So no, if they're a Paulette, no matter what you show them, look at Shabbat. If a person's rational, I mean, you just went through this here, in this particular Masal, but it's the same thing. There's only one man that fits. Right? I mean, there's nobody else that fits.
And God is actually going to tell us that the reason he's opposed to religion in this very proverb is because it renders its victims irrational. That
and
there's no way to reach them anymore.
I showed a guy, call no man father, or don't be, and then Paul goes out and says, be followers of me, and all this. And he goes, well, there's several different types of fathers that can be spoken of here. So, okay. So he's doing exactly what Yahweh told him not to do, and you've got an answer for that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So with confusing false perceptions which invert reality in his heart, he devises and inscribes. And by the way, Paul both devised his scheme and inscribed it. Antagonistic schemes without consideration of their consequence, which are evil and adversarial. In other words, he's associated with the whore of Babylon, with Satan, in everything, continuously creating controversies and contentious strife. As one who claims to be sent out as a messenger to do away with something important. Shalak. I don't think that Rabbi Akiva ever claimed to be an apostle. I'm pretty sure Muhammad didn't claim to be an apostle.
No. Claimed to be a prophet.
Yeah, in fact, I don't even no. Muhammad never claimed to be a prophet.
Well, not Akiva, but Muhammad.
No, Muhammad never claimed to be a prophet. Never once.
Afterwards,
in fact, in the Quran, which is really Muhammad's voice, the Quran says that Muhammad's not a prophet. He said he was never given the ability to be a prophet, that he was not a prophet. The Quran specifically acknowledges that Muhammad is not a prophet. Now, Muhammad in the Hadith attempted about a dozen prophecies. They were all ludicrous, but the gist of them is the world was going to come to an end, and the day of judgment would be 500 years after his death.
Yeah, 1100 CE, if I recall.
Correct. It didn't happen.
And when that happened, that women were going to outnumber men 100 to 1. That's there, too.
Right. They're all going to be hoary head.
I believe you said wishful thinking.
Yeah. And that's right. And all the rocks and stones are going to cry out, "There's a Jew behind me, kill him." At that time.
Yeah.
No, Muhammad was not a prophet. Never claimed to be a prophet. Never got a single prophecy right. Which is the same thing with Paul. Paul never claimed to be a prophet. He did provide one prophecy, and he got it wrong. Once again, Paul's the messenger. And, you can say, okay, well, Muhammad did claim to be a messenger of Allah, but he didn't try to do away with the Torah. Muhammad falsely claimed that his Quran confirmed the Torah. Not the antithesis of it, but he claimed to confirm the Torah. Paul specifically was doing away with the Torah. Now, the reason all this is important, and the reason we're hammering Paul here, is because God thinks it's important. God thinks it's important, so important that 3,000 years ago, he revealed this warning against Christianity. Upon this, therefore, suddenly, surprisingly, openly, albeit briefly, he will arrive with his destructive opposition and ruinous calamity. He will smash, shatter, breach, and break something vital. And as a result, he will suffer affliction in an instant. And there will not be any remedy. There will not be any cure. There are not a lot of things where Yahweh says, I can't save him. I can't fix it. I can't resolve the problem. There is no remedy and there is no cure. Even for his people's wayward nature, the Israelites. He said, you know, I got a cure for that. I can resolve that. For the religion of Christianity, for Pauline Christianity, God's saying, I've got no remedy. I've got no cure. That means there can't be a single Christian in heaven. Not a single Christian ever has been saved. And Paul, his destiny is to be condemned. There is no remedy, there is no cure for the affliction that he has perpetrated. He is going to suffer affliction. You know, the Hebrew word typically, happens to be the word shabar, but the word that actually means to respond and answer, but in the one place where it's dealing with Yom Kippurim, and it's rendered in most Bibles, afflict your soul, as opposed to soul shall answer and respond to the invitation, approaching the maternal light of Yahowah. The reason that the word's distant meaning beyond this is anah, from answer and respond to affliction, is if you don't answer and respond to Yahweh's invitation, your soul will be afflicted. You know, and it's also there so that we know that Yahushua's soul was afflicted, so our souls would not be. Well, here's God is saying that the consequence to Paul that he brought on himself is that he's going to be afflicted. And that the thing that he smashed and shattered, and there's two things that he tore asunder: the Torah and its covenant. Two most important things in the universe. And you'd be hard-pressed to find anybody else that shattered something that was important to God.
Kind of interesting. Here's a little tiny little side that struck me on that one, on the shattered part. In the olden days, they used broken shards to write on, and then you connect that with all his writings that do these, they break it. I mean, it's odd little things, but it's just fascinating to me how he uses little words that have multiple.
So at the time, because paper was invented in 400 CE, and so Paul would come onto the scene and start writing in about 52 CE and finish in around 70-something CE. That
so he didn't have papyrus. Yeah.
No, so he could have written on papyrus. He couldn't have written on paper. He could have written on papyrus, and he could have also written on parchment. It's likely he wrote on papyrus, but you would say that the writing implement would have been a broken shard.
Mm-hmm. And well, that's one of the meanings of shabar, you know. And
yeah, no, I meant paper when I said papyrus.
No, he could not have written on paper. Paper would not be invented until the 4th century.
And so they would have probably been using a shard.
Yeah.
Very likely could have been.
Yeah. Possibly. They talk about his broken pieces of shard, you know, and he's writing in, but he also used them as writing implements. So I'm trying to get more Yada-like. Connect all these little dots, and just because they're just amazing. It's a strange language that you can do all this. You couldn't write something like this in a million years in English.
No.
Oh, here's one
It's
for you.
interesting, too, that you mentioned affliction, Yada, because Paul was big on that. Like, he thought he was suffering for Messiah. And that this was a noble thing. To be afflicted by a man was a noble thing.
Yeah. In fact, he talked about all of his suffering and how his suffering was completing the inadequacy of the Messiah's suffering, and he has one place where he goes on for about what must be 100 words that he ties together in the sentence, and he talks about all the times that he was beaten and drowned and pulverized and whipped and all that sort of thing, all the affliction that he suffered. Yeah, you're right.
It was a legacy of his Pharisaical upbringing. too.
Yeah, but you know, I don't see where where we have any other Pharisee that's out there into self-flagellation. I mean, it's there were Christians that did it. I mean, I think a lot of what is considered today part of the Great Tribulation of Christians under Diocletian is actually self-flagellation. They sacrifice their own lives to demonstrate the validity of their faith. So
Wow.
they killed themselves. And in fact, there's a lot of lines from the Romans at that time saying, you know, if you're so insistent on getting killed, why don't you just walk off a cliff? I mean, why are you bothering us? Why are you hounding us to kill you? Well, just don't bother us. Just go kill yourself if that's what you want to do.
And
a
if
lot
Yah
of that
ever
today, if
asked
you look
us
at
to
Roman
willingly
Catholicism in the Middle America, South America region, the Mexico, South America area, they will crawl on glass to show their faith and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, yeah. Back in the ancient days, they used to walk on hot coals to demonstrate their faith. And you know, you look at the times in medieval Europe where whole countries would have days where they would go, where everybody would go whip themselves. They would beat themselves to a pulp.
Martin Luther climbed up the steps with bloody knees constantly when he, you know.
So they do take on that secondary. They do take on that meaning.
Yeah, and imagine a God that would say, you know, what I really want you to do is I want you to suffer pain. Right? If you suffer needless pain, that's going to please me.
So
pretty sadistic God.
Oh, it's the God of religion.
That's the kind of God who would say, "Love me or burn in hell."
Yeah, it's the same kind of God that would say that I'm going to create a being to get down on his knees and worship me. I want to create a being to tell me 24/7 how wonderful I am, because that'll really make me feel good.
Oh yeah, that's.
The religion.
There is a third thing that Paul attacked. One thing that jumps out at me now is he totally misrepresented the Spirit. Just he there's a lot in his writings about the Spirit and how that it was contrary. It was in a completely different understanding than the Torah and Yah.
Yeah, his spirit is first was masculine because he was representing the spirit of Hasatan. Yeah, it's always masculine. And while the Greek word for spirit is a neuter term, Paul, when he applies a pronoun, applies a masculine pronoun. But Pauline, the spirit in Pauline Christianity is a Gnostic entity. You know, in Gnosticism there was the dualism where the physical world was imperfect, and the ideal world was that spirit world that was non-physical, and there was no way for a physical entity to be perfect. And so, for Paul, anything of the flesh was corrupt because of Gnosticism. He used Gnosticism to suffer Christianity.
He was having a field day with the Gentiles. He was having a field day with the Gentiles.
Right.
And, you know, it's like there was
led with Dionysus.
The Messianic circles who want to defend Paul. And, you know, like you have Shimon Kefesh saying that he's hard to understand. Well, then why would you put them in with a group of people that don't have any background knowledge in the Torah? You know.
Well, he not only said he was hard to understand. What he said was he used circular reasoning, and he was a sophist. And you know, if somebody calls you a sophist, that means you're using men's philosophy. I mean, come on.
In the Messianic circles, though, they would say that, it's not that Paul was contrary to the Torah, it's just that we don't understand. He's such a high level, he has such a high understanding of the Torah that it's easy to misunderstand. That's how they interpret what Shmonk ever said. But at the same
That's
time,
not
it's
what
like,
he
okay,
said.
well, if that's true, then
Yeah,
why
but of
would
course
he
that's
be
not what he
responsible
said.
for the Gentiles?
That's not what he
Yeah.
said.
No,
You know, I put the note up. I don't know if you're in the chat room or not, but I put the note up on exactly what he said, word for word.
Yeah.
I mean, there it
I
is.
just got that.
No,
from the chat
what
room.
Jason's doing is he's representing the Messianic group and how they'll defend.
No, I understand he's not doing it yet.
Right. Yeah.
I'm just
of course, what's
saying it's an
interesting
impossible
is that,
situation. You know.
and what of course is,
I mean-
is interesting here is the excuse is to ignore what he actually said. And
Yeah, sure.
there are things that Paul wrote that are clearly gibberish, that they don't make any sense in any language. They're just poorly written. And there's a lot of what Paul said that's just flat out poorly written. And to say that something that is poorly written is at a high level is to be ignorant. But
Yeah, well, you know,
most of what
I
Paul
want to
said
give you guys.
is clear. It's just clearly wrong.
I want to give you guys something here. I mean, seriously. Okay, and this is just going to be, this is just a quick quiz, very, very quick. I committed a sin in humbling myself because I preached the gospel of God to you without charge. I robbed other churches, taking wages to serve you. Who said that?
Paul.
Okay, good.
So,
Now, who said this? Without money or cost, listen carefully to me. Incline your ear and come to me. Listen that you may live. So you will be able to. So I will be able to establish an everlasting covenant relationship with you. Who said that?
Yahowah.
Yeah, without money or cost, he opens up. Now, see, this is the kind of thing where I'm saying, and this is what I'm talking about here, where I've actually got these in notes side by side.
Yeah. All the
Now,
way through.
how can,
we're the only assembly.
Oh, we lost Jason. I
Lost
got
Jason.
a note that he was
too bad.
Yeah, he dropped out.
And I realized Jason was talking about the Messianics. It wasn't Jason
The thing that
advancing this. I knew that.
I realize that evidence and reason means nothing to a religious person. So a religious person is going to excuse Paul with feelings, not with evidence and reason, because it can't be done. Evidence and reason condemns Paul. And the only way that I'm going to approach any of this material is, what does it say, and what does that mean? And what Paul said and what he means is wholly and completely contradictory to what Yahweh says and means. And he wholly and totally contradicted the Torah. And this notion that, no, he was talking about the oral law, you can't make that argument. He never once cited
that's
the Talmud.
ridiculous. I was saying before I got cut off there, is that, like, we're the only really assembly, if I can use that word, that really we have this understand. Like, I don't know anybody else who has this, and yet it's such an important prophecy, and we're the only people that really understand it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's like I'm shocked still to this day that what we have found is so obvious. And there's none of us that are bragging that, wow, we are really smart because look what we have found. What we found was always right there. It's clear, it's obvious, it's in our face, and yet why are there so few people that are willing to accept God's own testimony in His own words?
And it has to be true that they don't care. They don't like him.
We're the only ones that could actually do something about it. You know what I mean? Like through your books, Yada, and your commentary. I mean, you're the only person really pointing these things out.
Well, I think I was the only person there for a while, and now there's a bunch of us doing it. But we're all doing it. We're all doing it together.
Yeah.
And
personally, I've had somewhat of a difficult time last couple of years, just being in business and stuff. But I've gotten out of that now, so I'm going to have, like, I'm going to be working for somebody else, like Continental 12s, 14 days off a month. And I really want to just, I don't know, I really just want to get these points together and just get it out there, So it's so liberating to get rid of Paul. I remember when I first heard you talking about it back in the days with Yoel, and you first started to come, like, to realize what Paul was really saying. I was right there at that time when that was going on, when you're first coming to realize that.
When I really did that originally, I lost my closest friend at the time over it, and it seemed so shrill, and it seemed, why aren't you just talking about the things of Yahweh? Why are you spending all this time exposing and condemning Paul? And here we are. I thought this proverb was just going to be fatherly advice. I started it because William, the elevator man, our dear friend, sent me this passage and asked me, who do you think this woman is that's being talked about in this passage? And it's the whore of Babylon. And I didn't know it was going to be about Paul. And the very fact that Yahowah, even 3,000 years ago, spent this much time, this many words, exposing and condemning Paul, tells me that there are very few things that we could do with our time that are more important during this time than to expose and condemn Paul using Yahweh's testimony. So,
well, he points Paul out in many different occasions. This just being one of them.
Yes.
The amount of damage he's done, and we're the only people that can know and do anything about it.
God's, you might think, would have a lot to say about Islam, and he does, and he's really antagonistic towards Islam. There must be, 1,000 mentions of the religion of Islam. But God knows as well as we know that the Quran is so stupid, and Muhammad was so disgusting, that you don't need God's warning not to be a Muslim. Muhammad was so despicable, and his Quran is so insultingly stupid, that if you're going to believe it, then there's nothing that God can do to reason with you. I mean, God's way too smart to appeal to you if you're going to fall for something that stupid. But when it comes to Pauline Christianity, it's a different story. Paul wasn't stupid. Paul was evil.
He was clever,
Paul was twisted. Yeah. And Paul was clever. His ploys were clever. And what God is saying here is true. Is if you are not informed regarding the Torah, he'll fool you.
Right. Over in Dabarim, when Yahweh says, surely a person who proclaims a message on behalf of a deity who oversteps their bounds to speak words in my name, which I haven't instructed or directed him to speak, and who speaks in the name of foreign Elohim, indeed, that prophet shall want to die, telling us there is that third place. And you ask any Christian today how they're saved. They're saved by what? Grace and faith.
Right, faith in the gospel of grace.
Yes, God's spell of gratia. Whoa.
Yes.
God's
gratia.
That was straight from Paulos, wasn't it?
Jason is correct. And while I will tell you, I personally enjoy the nurturing, uplifting testimony of Yahweh. Yahweh has a job that needs to be done. And right now, there's 2 billion people trapped in the religion of Christianity. And there is no one else out there that is an authoritative spokesperson quoting Yahweh's testimony to expose and condemn the religion of Christianity based upon its author, Paul, other than us, our little covenant family.
Yeah.
And it's what God wants done. It's what he did for us, just no one's paying any attention to it. So, Jason, I think I would much rather, personally, I would much rather spend the time just enjoying the uplifting statements of Yahweh. But you know, we've got an eternity to do that.
Yeah, that's comforting to know.
You know, Eliah went way out of his way to expose Baal and his lies. I mean, he did.
Okay, when you read Yahshua, when you read Yirmiyah, when you read Eliah, do you find guys speaking for Yahweh that saying, "Oh, you are all so wonderful. Everything is just going to be peaches and cream"? Or do you find guys
you don't find
that are
you find the
exposing
opposite. You find people in opposition to the world.
Isn't the whole thing of Hosea God's animosity towards the religious nature of his people?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sure is.
Yeah. I was just going through, I just went back to the ITG audio archives, and when you went through the name chapter, and man, there's nothing even close. There's nothing even close.
Someone asked about Aaron in the chat room, what it meant earlier. I believe it means free will.
Enlightened free will.
Enlightened.
Yeah, enlightened free will. Yeah. What a marvelous name. You know, Moshe, the name means to draw out, and Aaron means enlightened free will. God's really smart. But God's own testimony doesn't mean anything to those people caught in religion. That's why this diatribe against calling Christianity began by God asking a question. So what's it going to take? What do I have to do? What do I have to say? What has to happen for you to wake up?
You know what? One thing I thought of doing is once I get my my ducks in a row as far as arguments go, I think it'd be kind of interesting just to, you know, call into Christian radio stations and harass them with really good questions.
Yeah. You know, the beginning of Questioning Paul now, where it goes through, I don't know if it's 10 or 20 questions. You know, I said, you know, that Christianity claims, but that cannot possibly be true. To go through those with a Christian radio station, they claim that God died for their sins, but that can't possibly be true. God can't die. You know, they claim that God has a church, but you know, you go through each of these things, you say, you know, there is no word even remotely akin to church. And
I would like to
recognizing ecclesia as a translation of mikra. Oh my goodness! Now we're right back in the Torah. Or you say, you know, they'll claim that they have a New Testament, and you say, wait a minute, the only reference to a renewal of the covenant speaks of a time that has not yet happened. And when it does happen, it's going to be based entirely on the wholesale incorporation of the Torah, negating any New Testament. And then,
exactly.
you know, the passage
with the renewal. So
just 2 weeks ago, we were talking about where Yahweh says, "Do not think there is absolutely no chance whatsoever that I'm ever going to split my covenant into two."
Yeah, that was pretty clear. That was kind of a death knell.
Yeah, but even if you could get one question on in one of those broadcasts,
right?
How many people would just? Because for me too, I remember still when I was in a Bible study before they asked me to leave. I remember reading in Acts, and I was like, "Wait a minute, Paul circumcised Timothy? What is that about, really?"
Yeah.
Don't you think that was an embarrassment at that point? He was actually confronted with people that knew right from wrong. I mean, that's all it was.
No, you know, I think that that Paul recognized that the arguments that were brought against him at the Jerusalem Council were right. So he's not going to. He wasn't going to change. He was already too dug in. But if you look at what God says about circumcision, if you're not circumcised as a male, you cannot participate in Passover. You can't participate in Passover. There is no eternal life. And then he says, if you're not circumcised as a man, you can't enter heaven. And I'm sure they quoted both of those passages to Shaul. I mean, if I know them, they knew them.
Who knows? I mean, they may have just rejected him outright and been hostile to him.
But then
from the
why would he
beginning,
circumcise Timothy?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
The fact that he
I mean, like,
circumcised Timothy,
Shimon
I think he had to be convicted by the argument.
I agree.
Yeah, hey, that's pretty. Yeah, that's.
But you know, there's another
Yeah.
possibility here. Yahweh said that his position on circumcision would be shifty. If he didn't circumcise Timothy, then his position on circumcision was no longer shifting. It would have been wholesale opposition. But the fact that he circumcised his lover tells us that his position on circumcision was hardly anything set.
Whatever is expedient, he said.
Whatever is expedient. Yeah,
whatever keeps people listening to me.
Yeah, exactly. So then,
should have stoned them 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, I wish. Now here's the things that God says are an abomination and hated. So it says, behold, these 6 things Yahweh hates, and 7 are an abomination to his soul. So there's 6 things on this list that God hates, and there are 7 that are an abomination. All right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm pretty sure I know which one of these is just an abomination. But God hating something is worse than an abomination. So there's of the 6 things that God hates, all of them are an abomination. But there's one thing here that is strictly an abomination, but not specifically hated. And it begins, haughty eyes and visions of grandeur, observations, including a rebellious perspective. Something God hates is a self-exalting public display, a defiant view, a proud outward appearance. You know, if you're going to work with Yahweh, you ought not claim credit. You know, it's like when you were saying that where else do you find this kind of material, and the answer is no place else. You don't find us jumping and saying, yeah, aren't we great? No. What we say is, isn't Yahweh great?
Absolutely.
It was all there. All we did was read it and present it. You know, and if the moment you think that you know, you've got visions of grandeur, you're done. God hates that. And then it says a deceptive tongue. Why? Because false and misleading statement, that's the very essence of how people are betrayed and deceived. And number 3 on the list is hands that shed innocent blood.
There goes militarism right out the window.
Yeah, it's that whole idea of militaries, not something God's fond of.
Like bomb the hell out of them.
Right.
Things like
A
that.
heart which devises and writes troublesome, idolatrous, unjust, and false plans. And the heart here is, of course, the seat of reason in an individual, so it's their perspective, it speaks of their motivations, but someone who's motivated to write down that which is unjust, false, and evil. You know, so far we're,
I was going to say,
I find that most religious.
Well, I just don't know what an abomination is then, because my understanding of abomination, I mean, that's an abomination. But I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying that I don't know what abomination is.
No. All 7 of these are an abomination. All 7. There are 6
But they're
of the
beyond.
So he doesn't hate the misleading.
that God hates. So there's 6 of the 7 that God hates. There are 7 that are, all 7 are an abomination.
Yeah.
This is the one
so he
that God
doesn't
doesn't
hate.
This next one. This next one God doesn't hate. Now, for God to hate, He's got to know what you're doing. All right? For God to hate something, He's got to know of it. He's got to have an emotional response to it. He has to be extraordinarily adverse to it. It's beyond an abomination now.
Something invested in it.
He's got something invested. And this next one, he has nothing invested in. This next one is feet, which rashly and impetuously run to and fro, darting about to approach that which is evil. Now, if you're scurrying after evil, there's people, they run to whatever the trendy religion is, or the trendy adaptation of the religion, whether it's
they run to church on Easter.
Yeah,
they run to church on Easter.
Right, and their Scientology is chic in Hollywood. They run to that, and in Utah, of course, it's Mormonism, and various places in the world. There's the new chic religion. But people throughout time have flocked to religion. God doesn't hate them. It's an abomination what they're doing. It's disgusting. It's repulsive what they're doing, but God doesn't hate them. Doesn't even know them. So the feet that run to religion.
That's his plumb line. It's like, if you're not interested in the truth, then, really, you're not breaking my heart by,
Correct.
being destroyed.
Correct. Yes. So the feet that run, darting about, approaching that which is evil, those are the victims of religion. God doesn't know them. They don't know God. There is no emotional attachment here. God couldn't know them. If he knew them, it would tear them apart. And so that's the reason why six are hated. And it still means that being religious is an abomination. But it doesn't garner God's ire. The one thing you don't want to do is get God mad. He's not the person you want mad at you. And if you are scheming and designing troublesome, unjust plans, writing them, which is what Paul did, that gets God mad. If you're killing innocent people, that gets God mad. If you're proclaiming that you're an apostle and you're not, and that you're speaking for God and you're not, and that you were given the world's population and you were not, that gets God mad.
Interesting, though, maybe he was an apostle, but an apostle reeks of Nicolaitan type of philosophy.
Yeah.
So,
right, it does. It's a hierarchical.
You're an apostle, so get out.
So the next two are both hated and abominations. A maligning soul whose breath utters sedition, breathing out slanderous and deceptive testimony, which incites the deluded to worship false gods. Well, there's not a lot of people that other than Paul. I mean, certainly Muhammad did that as well. And then one who claims to be sent out as a messenger to do away with something important, creating controversy and contentious strife between brothers.
That would be Paulos.
Yeah, that would be Paulos. You've got no other candidate there because the Arabs and the Jews are not brothers. And Muhammad never did away with the Torah. He claimed that his Quran confirmed the Torah. And so the only person that really would claim to be sent out as a messenger to do away with something important and create a strife between brothers is Paul.
Oh yeah, well, right at the very beginning, there he was in front of Shimon and the other disciples, and strife.
Yeah,
that's what he brought from day one.
The supposed leaders, for whatever reason, they were considered supposed leaders. They meant nothing to him. He's talking
supposed
about
leaders, the elders.
He's talking about the disciple. He's talking about the disciples specifically: Yahowah, Jacob, and Shimon Peter. Peter, James, and Paul are Peter, James, and John. And he's saying, these supposed leaders, for whatever reason that they, y'all think that they're important, it means nothing to me. What?
But they never elevated themselves, and they didn't make a lot of noise, and they didn't have to argue that they were sent from God and all this kind of stuff. They were just in the position where, we spent a lot of time with the Son of God, so
one of the things about
they were in a position to give insight into the Torah.
I'm
One of the
not
things
even
about-
into the whole Son of God thing. I'm into the Son of Man thing, which is a diminished part of Yahweh. I mean,
Yeah, I
don't
am
even-
too. Yeah, I am
I don't
too.
even
That's why
look
he
at
used
it as
the-
Son
that's why
of
he
God.
used the- Yeah, why he used the term that he constantly referred. I think the son reference is valid when you understand that Ben is from Bana to build the family name, and that Ben would be an individual who comes in the father's name doing the father's business.
Yeah, it would
he
be a
was
manifestation.
And I don't have a problem with son and family from that point of view. It's just that, and I think, Jason, you know this really well, is that Yosha himself referred to himself as the Son of Man because he was a diminished manifestation of Yahweh.
More than anything else.
And he never wanted attention brought to himself. He most certainly didn't want anybody praying to him or worshiping him. And he didn't want any. He just says, "I'm trying to point the way to the Father." And so.
Yeah, but he obviously had understanding. That's what I mean. I mean, people that are interested in the truth will gravitate.
Yeah, he authored the Torah. That's pretty good when it comes to understanding.
That's what I meant by that. You know, people that are interested in the truth will gravitate towards people that possess it, you know, that have a deeper understanding of it. So,
and people
incidentally, I wanted to point
we'll
this
call
out.
those who gravitate to the truth and who proclaim the truth liars. That's what an insecure person does.
I was in front of a banker today who told me that his favorite place to be was wherever missionary work needed to be done, and I proceeded to tell him about Yahweh's words, and you know what he said about that? Yada, yada, yada. What he said, I looked at him, I thought, what an ass.
You know what he's doing? You know what he's doing? He's completing the sacrifices of Christ. That's what he's doing.
Yeah. It's that one of the things that we learned in the review of Shamuel, when he was speaking of Shaul, is that Shaul was good, but Shaul was wrong.
Wrong.
And what we found is that being good, and people are missionaries because they wanted to do good. They want to be considered good people. They want to do a good thing. It's like JB wrote me a note, and I included it into a rewrite I just did of one of the chapters where I think it was the third chapter of Observations, where God said, you can't buy influence with me. I'm not going to be influenced with anything that you do or provide. And what God is saying is that good doesn't matter. Good doesn't cut it.
He doesn't say walk.
King Shaul was good, but he's not in heaven.
Well, I got a response to that banker there for you, Larry. Yada, yada, yada. Yeah, I am all about yada, yada, yada. I want to know. I want to know.
I wrote it down for him. I said, you ought to go look at Yada Yahweh. That's
start by knowing.
I'm all about
it
yada.
It didn't matter with this guy. It didn't.
By the way,
matter.
what James wrote me the other day, and I included in this chapter, is that heaven is not a reward. It most certainly isn't a reward for being good, but it's not a reward for anything. Heaven is a family home. Being in the family isn't a reward. It's a relationship, but it most certainly isn't a reward. There are aspects of things you can do in a family that can be rewarding, but being part of the covenant is not a reward. There's nothing, when you think of reward, it's something that you get for being good at something. And no, it isn't based upon being good at anything, and it isn't a reward. We're not bragging that we're in the covenant because, we've done something good to earn it. No.
Yeah.
We're
there
because we're right with Yahweh.
Well, here's
you
want to know how insane this idiot got? I'll tell you how insane he got, because I pointed out that basically he said, oh, man, there's something I said. I don't pay homage to Amun-Ra. Yeah, you may not know this, but there were placeholders, and I finally added one. And by the way, Aman, a word that was used in Paleo-Hebrew, was never used at the end of a declarative statement as some kind of a religious reference to something. And he said, well, you know, that when I painted the picture of the cross,
he would say Amen at the end of his letters.
Well, here's what the clown said to me. Well, God, I don't know who Yahweh is. I would say Yahweh, he says, but I don't know who that is. But God, the same God, because we have the same God, he says, the same God created good and evil, so it wouldn't matter. In other words, you're out there worshiping Satan on Sunday, and it wouldn't matter. It really wouldn't matter to this guy.
And by the way,
yeah.
God did create good and evil. He did create good and evil. Absolutely. And you'd have to ask yourself, so why did he create good and evil?
Would that be
by the way,
choice? You know, the purposes of choice?
Why would a God be worth worshiping that wants to be worshipped?
I got an answer for that, Yada. He created good and evil to separate. You can't separate without having the two.
Of course. Well, I know why he created good and evil. We all know that. What's the purpose of free will? What's the purpose of choice? How do you have love?
That's why the seventh isn't. He doesn't hate, because the existence of evil. That's the plumb line. If you're deceived, you know, it's sad, but you've allowed.
I don't know. Yeah, God doesn't know you. He doesn't hate you. If you're deceiving, He hates you. If you're killing His creation, if you are leading people away from Him, if you are being deceptive, if you're claiming to be what you're not, then you are the victimizer. God hates the victimizer, as we all should. It's the moral thing to do. Mm-hmm. You know, I began the rewrite of the first chapter by saying, hate is a virtue.
Yeah.
God
and
hates
evil too. It's interesting that we still consider we consider both good and evil now. That the knowledge of good and evil was in the midst of the garden, and even to this day we're considering it. You know,
well, that's why it was in the
we
center
have a knowledge
of
of both.
It was the center of the garden, so therefore choice is paramount. I mean, there's no way in the world. I mean, can you imagine? Yahweh's pretty smart, and can you imagine having two naive people who have always been taken care of, trying to deal with a being that's about, you know, exponentially smarter than they are, and 14.7 billion years old and crafty? Who do you think Yahweh thought might win that debate? You know, I mean, really. It was to provide choice, because they had to choose to come back to Yahweh, and that's what made the relationship real. Thus, choice. Thus, you know, good and evil. Simple matter. Right?
All right, my friend. Yep. We've reached the bewitching hour here in terms of our time, so we are still recording, but have done broadcasting. It's a good place for us to pick up next time we can. And I appreciate you joining us, Jason. That was great. Your first point and every point thereafter. Your first point on when it talks about being afflicted. There's only one guy who claimed to speak for God that constantly bellyached about being afflicted, and that was Paul.
And that was a good
point. We are on a mission. This is, you know, the mission that God wants done is He wants people to know what He had to say about government and about religion, and particularly about Islam and Christianity, because it's half of the world's population, maybe more than half. And it's just a shame that so many people have been fooled by something as ridiculous. And if it wasn't for the fact that religion renders its victims incapable of thinking, the obvious failures, the contradictions, the inconsistencies in these religions would immediately cause the believers to reject them. But, religion is a very powerful opiate. All right, guys. Well, I enjoyed our chat. Yeah, look forward to being with you next Shabbat. And we'll keep on writing, and hopefully we'll have a lot more on the 91st Psalm, and we'll maybe even have a home for the first 4 chapters of observations for our time between now and then.
That'll be nice.
Yeah. Good night. Hey, and Kirk,
See you
try
next
not to
time.
get too excited. I can hear the excitement from here, man. Okay?
Yeah, I know.
I'm holding back for you.
Yeah, it's,
You're scaring me over here. It's like a riot. It's like
I
this time of night, but I'm
I do
listening to
love
every
that.
word.
All right,
I'll
good
see
night,
you
guys.
then.
All right.
Talk to you guys next week.
Night, guys.
Bye-bye.